Hey, Cypress, thank you so much for being in worship today. So glad you guys are here. As you know, we're wrapping up our series called Here to There. And the whole premise of this series, frankly, was there's times in life we know we're here and sometimes we wish we were there. And then there's other times we don't exactly know where there is. We just know we can't stay here any longer. And again, if you've missed any of the first 3 weeks of this series, we'd love for you to go back, catch up online. Week 1, we talked about how it's important to prioritize progress over perfection. There's only one who's been perfect, that's Jesus, but we're all in the process of becoming the people God wants us to become. Week 2, my nephew, Davey Blackburn, man, if you weren't here to hear that teaching, his story, the power of forgiveness, and that key phrase, we all hold the keys to unlock the prison of ourselves through forgiveness when we've been hurt. Last weekend, Pastor Jackson talked to us about making sure we're surrounded by the right group of people, the right people that help us make the journey we want and need to make, and what the role of serving is. That serving other people, it seems counterintuitive, but it also is a vital part of what enables us to move from here to there. This weekend, I am so absolutely privileged to sit down with a very dear friend of mine, Jim Kress. Jim is a certified counselor. Our relationship, we met when Serena and I went to you for counseling down in Charlotte, North Carolina. Mm-hmm. I've told so many people it's a handful of days that completely has changed my life, our leadership. A lot of people know you from your theology and therapy podcast with Lisa Turkis. You're a featured guest there. I go online, I can't find anything that doesn't have less than several 100,000 views. You're involved with On-Site, the Oaks, Haven, executive training, and corporate training and counseling. And most importantly, today, you're my friend. And we're here to have a conversation about betrayal. So thank you so much for making time in your schedule to be here with us.
You know, all the conversations we've not had a conversation about betrayal.
Yeah.
So it's not just same old wash, rinse, and repeat conversation. It's a topic that I live in the trenches of, and I know you know that. And I look forward, I don't even know all the questions you're going to ask, but this is a key topic, even in the church.
Well, let's jump into it then. When I hear the word betrayal, I mean, a lot of times we go straight to Judas, you know, who betrayed Jesus.
Of course.
There's betrayal of sometimes friends, sometimes it's a boss, maybe it's even self-betrayal. I know you were doing a staff development day with us. Talk a little bit, you made a distinguishing difference between a feeling or a state of being.
Yeah.
And I would ask you, how would you define betrayal?
Well, I'm going to think first in the category of something that's historical, meaning to really do your life story work. And there are many nuances when it comes to betrayal. You've already gone to a big one in the Bible, Jesus. And he was betrayed by Judas. Michael Card put in a song years ago, only a friend can betray a friend. I don't think we're really betrayed by enemies. It's just the idea that that's what they do. They are our enemies, whether they're in the category scripturally of the world, the flesh, or the devil and all of his forces. So betrayal can come, and I don't think anybody's come through childhood by not being betrayed by a friend. Maybe someone gossiped behind their back. It's how it lands. And yet the nomenclature of it all, people may say, we're really going to call that betrayal, but it is. That's more at times on a younger developmental or micro level. And then go all the way on the spectrum of, which I've done so much work in, where people said, I got betrayed on a more macro level in a marriage, because there's not just a contract in marriage, there's a covenant. And one of Lisa Turkhurst's first books that I worked with her on was the book called It's Not Supposed to Be This Way. And nobody's going to get married and sign up on that day and all the wonderful celebration and say, I hope I get betrayed by that. So I think betrayal is anything that goes on when there is either a verbal understanding or contract in a relationship, In a marriage, you go through the vows and nobody thinks about them again for the next 20 years. But there were vows that were made there. There's an understanding sometimes that's not written down or not spoken, but there's kind of an understanding that you and I, we have a friendship, that you would not do something behind my back. It doesn't mean you won't. But if I have an expectation or a belief that there's an intimacy, the tighter, the rules get very tight, the more intimate the relationship, like in a marriage. So there's a sense that we assume, or we've even spoken, that this is how our friendship rolls, and then to feel that you did something behind my back incongruent with what I felt like our understanding was, that's going to be a betrayal. I do wish, just quickly, I tell people that every relationship you have, you can't find one, including with pets, every relationship has a contract. Most are not written down. In the business world, even in the church world, and everywhere we go, and we're operating in the marketplace, there are often written contracts, things that we are signed, because what happens in vagueness stays in vagueness. So I think this betrayal, the more we can get very clear, even in friendships, to say, kind of what are some of our rules of this relationship? Sometimes they're called boundaries.
What about, 'cause I'm listening to you and I'm thinking, there are times I felt betrayed, but then I almost have to question myself, was that real, or did I have an unhealthy or unrealistic
Very
expectation on the other party, whoever it may have been? I heard you talk before about uncommunicated or unexpressed bids.
Yeah.
Talk to us about that.
Well, in a relationship, especially in a marriage, if that's what we're talking about, there are always bids, and a bid, and this is done in research, that a bid is, I would like this, I put it this way, I like this in our relationship, and quite frankly, I'd like that not to happen. Sadly, most are not communicated. So inside, there are two things that go on. When you look at expectations, we all have them. It comes out of Alcoholics Anonymous, which is a powerful statement that often, not always, expectations are premeditated resentments. Like, I expect this. By the way, I didn't let you know that I expect this. So it can be a premeditated resentment. Either way, if I feel like you've betrayed me, or I have empirical proof that you've betrayed me, it lands on me the same. So to do that internal search of, okay, no, wait a minute. And remember, we've said many times, if it's hysterical, meaning I feel a lot, it's historical. So
whether it's real or perceived.
Totally. In the moment, I start off with in the moment, I don't care whether I have empirical data that you really betrayed me. I'm saying I stop, I search my heart, like Psalm 139, could even search with God. Search me, O God, try me. Is there something I don't see here? But I ponder for a moment versus going into accusation and say, what am I feeling? And I will feel a level of betrayal, or I'll experience, if you want to call it that state of being. Your feelings are 5 major ones: mad, sad, glad, bad, that's guilt or shame, or afraid. So inside this idea of feeling betrayed by a person, I start with that, and then I can begin to kind of, may I say it? I say it to people all the time, I begin to autopsy it. I begin to interview it, that part of me inside, and say, now, was this a real betrayal? Maybe I had an expectation that you bumped into that you didn't know about.
Yeah.
But I want to be able to do that. But inside first, I don't want to pole vault over it. Or if I'm dealing with a person and they get defensive and they say, I didn't betray you, why would you call it that? I'm already noticing how defensive they sound. I tell people, be curious, not furious. Say, okay, tell me more. I don't know. A lot of times my modus operandi, the method of operating, without me knowing it, will feel like it's betrayal to you. My motive was not to betray. I always ask about motive versus modus operandi, the method of operating. But if I read the room, know my audience, be curious and say, okay, I don't really connect that I betrayed you, Ken, but if you feel like I did, you are my friend. I want to be, again, curious, not furious and defensive. Tell me more about that. In the end, I may land the plane and say, you know, I'll go off and think about it more, but I don't feel like I really betrayed you. When we did the victim triangle here, which we talked much about, sometimes a person can be there and the whole world is betrayal. Either nothing's betrayal or the whole world, everything is betrayal.
Well, I'm even thinking of, I have a lot of friends in the marketplace, employer-employee relationships, unexpressed expectations. Leadership lesson a million years ago,
Sure.
Clarity to let people know exactly how they're doing is one of the greatest gifts you can provide them. That would be true in every relationship.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it's your job for you, my job for me, to provide clarity, whether you ever go to a counselor or not, to get clear and to have meaningful conversations. You know, here's a simple one. Just throw this out real quickly. People could say my boundary is, for example, in this tech world we live in, hey, I give myself permission to not respond to your text for 24 hours. I'm not going to, every time you text me, guarantee that you see the 3 dots, meaning I'm there trying to do something. That's just KOD, Ken on demand, or JOD, Jim on demand. So I'll let you know that I give myself permission that I'm not going to respond. Some people have said, I have a boundary that please don't call or text me. You know, you can turn do not disturb and all that on there. The phone's already thought about it, to say after a certain hour. Sometimes in a marriage, while it's not necessarily betrayal, is guess what? If the Lord wanted me to see the sunrise, he'd have put it about noon. And there are people literally going, until I've had my coffee or it's like 10 o'clock in the morning, don't try to bring stuff to me. We're all thinking. So if we could get clear, certainly in marriages, with our kids, the more intimate the relationship, the more significant the rules are, the relationship, the boundaries, and with a good friend and say, you know, sit down and just say, be different and say, what are some of the rules of our relationship? Mary, Joe, Bob, Ken. And most people, I think, are never going to do that. And think, hey, how about that? Just do something a little different. What are some of our expectations? What do you like? What do you not like? Not just in a marriage, but even in friendship.
It's interesting. I was reading, it's Psalm 41:9 says, even my best friend, the one I trusted completely, the one who shared my food, has turned against me. And I'm thinking of the part you said, and I've kind of known it, but not really. But when you said it's the closer the relationship, the greater the depth of the feeling of like, oh, I can't believe you did that.
And the clearer the rules need to be.
That's good.
No vagueness. The more intimate. I mean, you go to a marriage, you know that the rules need to get really significantly tight of what we could do in a marriage, or it's a mirage, not a marriage. But yeah, very important.
So let's go and let's just run with the marriage concept. Whether the rules were communicated or whether the rules were and expectations were assumed.
Yeah.
I said, I love you to death do us part. And I said, I'm going to love, cherish, sickness, health, like all the good stuff. And betrayal does happen in the relationship. Because of the closeness and the sense of trust, the wound is so much more devastating than if it's the cashier at the grocery store.
Of course.
When someone feels betrayed, then what do they do? What can they do to not live in the hurt of the betrayal for the rest of their life? How do they build a bridge to move beyond that?
Well, it's almost like you set me up on that. Prepositions matter. This is one of my sayings that I use. So to go first, I listen to questions when people ask, how do I build a bridge to go beyond that? Here's why I say prepositions matter. Because I want people to start first at ground zero, that red dot that I talk about that says, I am here, before they even think about the bridge to move beyond it. I want to say, what does this hit uniquely in me? Not what does it hit in a friend or someone else was betrayed and they just forgave and move on. Did they? What is this hitting in me? And again, sometimes if it's hysterical, it's historical, to think, where have I been betrayed? It's like a pebble in the pond. Those ripples go out. Where have I ever been betrayed? Clear back to childhood. Because often that betrayal of a spouse, if it happens, lands on a long runway of my life story that maybe I've never examined. In that, then, the preposition I use first is, how do I begin to move through this? That will imply, believe it or not, whatever your version, there are many versions now, the stages of grief. I want to start and give myself space, as Mary did in the gospel. She pondered these things in her heart. And if there's people like, get over it, forgive, you need to. Well, I love that, because forgiveness, one of the main words is aphiemi in Greek. It means to cancel the debt. How about we line up what are the debts that this betrayal cost, and it lands on betrayal from childhood. I just want people to be mindful, to be a little bit contemplative, to think about, what is this really hitting inside me? And if they might get a pad out and journal, and they say, what is this really hitting? I mean, and we're not even talking about the person who did the betrayal, because they have their own journey on that as well, versus forgive me and move on. So as I begin to move through, as the poet Robert Frost said, the way out is through, that's when I see the people come to the natural bridge, move across the bridge into forgiveness. Forgiveness is not at all the same as reconciliation. That's different. But I move through that, and then I can move beyond that. It's a process.
So when someone's been hurt, obviously going back in the story, I'm not saying to gloss over it, but if you just like, I forgive everything that bad happened to me, you really haven't killed the beast.
Right, of course.
It's still there. You have to be willing to face it, name it, get into the hole with it.
That you might then move through and beyond. There's a purpose. But people sit there, I forgave. If they'll let me, Ken, honest to God, I'll say, and I really try to be very kind and compassionate about this, godly about this. I take it very seriously. Well, this happened and I forgave him. This happened and I forgave her. I said, I believe you, because I'm believing they're telling what they believe is the truth. It doesn't mean I believe it's empirically accurate. And I say, would you let me lovingly, safely investigate that? Often I get this. No, it's just, and I say, healed wounds don't leak infection.
Well,
I won't trick you. Let me investigate it, because if you've really forgiven, the debts are paid. If I talk about my life before Christ and he's forgiven me, I can go, people do that all the time. Let me tell you back here what I used to be. They're not triggered by it. So I'll say, let me investigate this, and I'm gonna do my same thing. Tell me the facts of what happened to you, even if it's one fact of betrayal, and then I wanna know the impact. Fact and the impact is, what did this do to me? And then if it's the debt, I'll use, you know this, 3x5 cards. I'll lay them out on my floor and say fact on one card. This is how it was betrayed. What did it do to me? Made me think of this, reminded me of childhood. I thought it would never happen in my marriage or whatever. And say, if Afi, Amy, and Greek for forgiveness means to cancel the debt, is this a $5 debt? A $5 million debt? And tell me, I believe you, but how did you cancel the debt? I want to right size the debt. And then if people do that, I've helped so many, a whole book was written on it, Forgiving What You Can't Forget. As you move through that, then people will say, you know what, I literally feel, I might have a dream or watch a TV show or hear a friend was betrayed their spouse. I can feel a little activated by going, nope, I really have canceled the debt, and get out of what C.S. Lewis called the prison of yourself. So I'll know that. I said, let me just walk with you. And sometimes it's like, you really have forgiven. It's amazing. I can just feel it on you. Other times we hit this cul-de-sac and it's like, maybe I haven't forgiven. I go, let's still move to get to cross that bridge. I don't want people just wallowing back in it. But a lot of people do. Either they never forgive, bitter, or they do cheap forgiveness, which is not good. And let me tell you what I think about that. Bible, Jeremiah 6:14. It's a great verse. God says, my people, they're doing that. Literally in the Hebrew, it says, they treat the wounds of the daughter of my people. So that my people out here, here's what they do. They treat, and in Hebrew, it's a compound fracture. It's in a simple thing. They treat their compound fracture wounds superficially. They put literally a Band-Aid on a compound fracture, saying what? Peace, peace, when there is no peace. Now, there's a context of all that, but I still go back to that and say, I don't want to be a peace faker, right? A peacemaker is what I want to be. And to say, let me look at the wound, talk about it, forgive, even to say to that person, whether they ask for forgiveness, Lord, I'm taking them off my hook and put them on your hook. I literally feel like I will hand them over to you, God. But I don't want to do cheap forgiveness or bitterness and no forgiveness.
I'm sitting here thinking of, quite honestly, just so many thoughts, but some of my own parenting fails in kids who have been hurt or have felt betrayed, and a parent, I've been, oh, you're fine, get over it, move on, rather than coaching them or teaching them to say, in a classic phrase, tell me more.
Yeah.
Why do you feel this? And to help them process through that.
That's good.
So, you think about, the role of forgiveness in the betrayal, whether it's from the past and the present. What is the next step then? And one of the things I appreciate from my own work with you, coach, consultant, counselor, is that it's not just words that we pray in our head or even speak out loud, but to physically move so that in the future, when the enemy, Satan, does kind of whisper, hey, you really didn't forgive that, you are still going to be victimized by that. I have something concrete to point to. No, I did. That's the day I made the decision to forgive. How powerful that is. What would you say is the next step then towards my healing, not to go beyond it, but to move through it?
So I understand we're on video, right?
Yeah.
I'm aware of that, and yes, we are friends. Is there anything, I keep looking up at your head, and I've got one right here, so I'm in the club. I've got one on my lip right here. Do you have any scars anywhere in your body? You don't have to reveal them. Do you do that?
I would take my shirt off, but I had a hip replacement and a few shoulders done.
Okay. Think of it, that's beautiful, because that hip replacement is also about getting up and walking in newness of life. Let's go. If there's a scar there, we already know the answer. Did trauma happen to your body before the surgery? Yes. Was there trauma, which is what it feels like to a lot of people? Man, Jim, you're almost adding more trauma in your therapy. I am a soul surgeon. Was there trauma that had to happen to your body before you get your titanium or whatever you have in there? You had to be cut, and there was trauma, then there had to be healing, right?
Yeah.
Around that, what my point is around that is there's a scar. For some people after a hip surgery, the weather changes. The barometer does something, and I feel a little of that right there. But they don't go get in bed, call the surgeon. What they do is organically probably, I know what this is. Or they see a scar, like I have a couple on my face and other places on my body too. And it's like with that, I go, I know what that is. I have this one on my lip, and because I went through a pane of glass, it's a long story. And sometimes every now and when I shave, it's rare, but it can be tender. I don't think, oh my word, I don't even go back and think of the whole story. But I go, I know what that is. I know there were stitches here. I know I had hip surgery, and I'm healed. That is Nehemiah 5:7, which we've talked about a bunch. And so I took counsel with myself. Take forgiveness. There was a wound. There may have to be soul surgery to work through that. And world, flesh, devil, sometimes just you, just me, my own self will go, did I really forgive? What about that? And I'm like, no, I know what that is. I did forgive. I'm big on speaking it out loud. I proclaim right now the truth. I forgave that person. And then it's a little tiny bit of an echo of a former day, of a surgery, of a painful hip. And I go, yeah, it's there, but I don't just sit there and think it. Because the thought can't be heard out loud, but I speak out loud and say, I did forgive that person. I might sometimes, still me, say, you know what, I'm gonna look at that a little bit. Maybe there's just a little tiny bit more that I still need to forgive, but often, no, I don't. I remember there's a time and space and date, even if I never reconcile with that person, or if they never on their side of the street own anything, I remind myself, nah, this is just phantom pain. And a big one is, same situation you went through in betrayal, I went through in betrayal, and then it happens over here with a good friend. Sadly, in ministry, we've heard of so many pastors, and I've worked with many who have fallen, and then people go, why even bother? Everybody's going to betray somebody one day. Nothing new has happened to them, but they hear these stories which are real. And to take 2 Corinthians 10:5, take every thought captive and make it obedient to Christ. Say, Jesus, I did forgive. That's under the blood. That's just some memory floating around. Last thing, Martin Luther put it this way. Martin Luther said, just because the thought birds fly over your head doesn't mean they get to make a nest in your hair. Like, I know you thought, keep on flying. Just keep going. But some people don't do that. And next thing they know, they're thinking in serious doubt, maybe I never forgave. It's like, no, tell yourself the truth. You did forgive.
Yeah, when the betrayal, the pain, the hurt happens, we're either going to remember, reflect, wallow in it, accentuate it, or we're going to take that step of forgiveness. Let me flip it a little bit here.
Yeah.
For the person who's listening right now, in an honest self-reflection, they're the betrayer, not the betrayed.
Thank God for talking about those, that we must talk about those.
What would you say to that person?
Well, I would say I am one, because I betrayed my wife in pornography, being what I would call a pornography addict, over 20 years clean, sober from that. That's not the only type of betrayal. There's financial betrayal on the lowest level of just hiding some money or whatever else. There's gossip, which is a huge betrayal. So the idea, what I see is people either, to your question, not wanting to either deny that it really is betrayal, or some people saying, why is everything betrayal? Okay, I did that. And you hear the defensiveness. Do I need to call that betrayal? Don't worry about whether it is your motive to betray, but your modus operandi, again, the method of operating lands on the other person. Let's talk about us as friends. If you said, hey, let's talk, get a cup of coffee, we talk. When you did that, that hurt. Or you might say, I feel betrayed by you because of what happened. I'm always mindful of the scripture in the Greek says, be continually confessing your sins one to another. We need to be a confessional community. And I say, well, I don't think I was trying to betray you. I don't ever want to lead with that. If I am the betrayer, because there are two people right here on the stage who've betrayed people. Yep. You've done it, I've done it. And may we say, we've also betrayed ourselves. Come on.
Talk to us a little bit about, I've heard you say that sometimes the hardest person to forgive is yourself.
Sure.
And it's the last person to forgive. How do you get there? Because I've talked to so many people.
Sure.
I've wrestled with it myself, but how do you get over that? That when I think of like what Christ forgave us, but yet then there's times we struggle to forgive not just another person, but ourselves. It's almost like you're canceling or contradicting, almost like you be more important than God.
Well, I would take almost out, first of the 10 commandments, have no other gods before me. Judicially, we talk about we can kick that up to the Supreme Court. Experientially, if I will not forgive myself, hold myself in condemnation, when Romans 8:1 says there's therefore now no condemnation for those of us in Christ Jesus. I may not be trying to do it, but being an authentic Christian, a real person, I say, God, I got to start that you have forgiven me. Now, caveat, maybe he hasn't, because maybe I have not confessed it. We got to get into 1 John. There's a lot of things to talk about there in another place. But inside, there's a God, you've forgiven me. And I went, I'm a judge, a Supreme Court higher than you. I won't forgive myself. I love that you went there, because watch out for idolatry, quite frankly. Watch out that I am sitting there saying, you have forgiven me under the blood of Christ, and I won't forgive myself. Now, for a moment, take the word forgiveness out, because we get confused by it. Put in, aphiemi, you don't need to know that word, but in Greek, it means to cancel the debt. I want you to be a credit card company, a medical bill. I want you to look a hospital bill, and some people say, we're going to write that off. We cancel the debt. You can know, is that wow, I owed $5,000. There have been people who owe $30,000. The debt was erased. So inside, again, we can talk about how do I work and get past it, get over it. Start with yourself. You might get, a piece of paper and write down, only on forgiving yourself, what are the top 10 things in my life where I betrayed another person, or buy one, get one free, I've betrayed myself.
Yeah.
And I've said, this is something that I've done to myself. Write down simply, if you put a line down the middle of a piece of paper, here's the fact of what I did, go to the impact. What did this do to me? What did this cost me? I lost a friendship. Sometimes I lost a job. I may never get my wife's trust all the way back. My kids may say, yeah, how you treated me in childhood, whatever. Fact and impact. And then look down, and I want you to, as though you could take some red stamp and write, canceled. Or just write it down and say, I choose to forgive myself. Canceling the debt means I'm never getting those days back. So the Bible says redeeming the time going forward.
And there still may be consequences of those decisions, but to cancel the debt is you no longer owe me.
And I'm not, again, back to C.S. Lewis, I said it, I'm not in the prison of myself, and I say, God, I take all these now, imagine literally, go build a cross in your backyard or take it to the Bible and say, I take all of these things that I've done and I give them to you, God, I surrender. You can go in your backyard and write down your ledger and burn it and give it up and say, God, today I will no longer hold myself in contempt of these things. Now, later you go, I'm reminded you reap what you sow. When David sinned big, God forgave him, but Nathan said, David, the sword will never depart your house. That baby will die. So there are consequences that go on, even if you're totally righteous, reset with God. There are still laws in relationships. Some people say, you've really changed. I forgive you, and I'm not reconciling the marriage. I'm still going to divorce you. So there are always consequences, but inside, I want, again, back to just do your story work. Go to a counselor, be with a good friend, talk about the top 10 things that you've done that are failures in your life. And then to be able to say, here's the impact again, and I cancel the debt.
Cancel the debt for the other person. Cancel the debt for those who have wounded me.
That's right.
Cancel the debt for myself.
Yep.
Talk to us just briefly then, that healing, growing process. We've been in it, we've gone through it. The role of boundaries and godly friends to make that journey with us.
Yeah, so, Job had 3 friends and they weren't very good ones. Even if you were here, hi everybody, I'm Pastor Ken and I'm going to pick a church council, an elder board or whatever, you would not be very successful if you picked the 12 apostles. I mean, look at some of them, right? The one that seemed to have his act most together was Judas, and we know what happened there, financially, etc. People miss this, when Jesus was betrayed, and they give Judas, all this grief, which I understand the story, and then they next give Peter down the road. Peter fled, word for word in the text. Peter fled, and so did the rest of them. So many Christians have never read that. So the idea of, you think Jesus knows betrayal and all that goes with that. So I want to be able to right size, here's what's going on in the betrayal of how I've been betrayed, how I've been betrayed other people, and look inside. And as far as moving down the road and looking at friends, I want to have what Moses had, Aaron and Hur. There are days that I could say, you and I have had many good talks, could say, hey, let me tell you what I'm thinking. And, my wife may say that she feels betrayed by this. Do you think it is? All I need is a bad friend who says, Jessica needs to get over that. Oh, I hear that with people all the time. I want a friend that says, I will always, as a man, guard your wife. So if you come to me and want to fuss about your wife, I'm going to have her back. Now, we can right size it. Sometimes I say, I don't see this. Is it? And you go, yeah, let me tell you, you might use story and narrative and say, what do you think? Jesus did that all the time. Nathan tricked David with that. Oh, that guy, little poor guy, had the lamb. I need friends that will hold me accountable. They will not condemn me. They get to know me. I want them to know my story so they go, does this remind you back here about your dad, Jim? Your mom versus people? We're really good friends in our 30s and 40s, but we're ahistorical. You know nothing about my story, and yet we're good friends. Everybody today could find a couple of good friends, you may already have them, and say, let me tell you my entire life story, the facts and the impact of that, and help them to help me see what I call build a personal board of directors, have 4 to 6 seats on it. They may never meet, but you're on it, and you're on it, and you're on it, and these people can do a 360 around me, telling me the truth. And I want people who are Christians on it. You can have a non-Christian on it, but someone could say, and they're always thinking theologically, biblically, and they know me and my story. And they're gonna call me to a higher road.
One of the things I love that I've heard you say many times is you have more help and more hope than we have problems.
And help, hope, and healing.
Help, hope,
all
and
there.
healing than we have problems.
Your surgeon on your hip proved that, because there was a day that would have been a different story in your lifetime with a hip like that.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Can I ask you a question?
Please.
Unscripted.
Yeah.
So, little snow in Columbus, Ohio. You had your hip, you're good. Did you, by any chance, step out of your vehicle and slip on ice?
And other people saw me fall. Yes.
Yeah, and all about that I'm saying is levels and degrees. You even told me the story. You got up. As far as I can tell, I don't know, you're not going back to your surgeon.
No.
And some people, though, could have fallen in a different way. I'm not talking about moral failures. And say, I have to go back and I re-injured it, right, Ever? So right-sizing that, sometimes you got up and said, a little tender for a while, even if you failed. See, forgiveness is not a one and done of me. I have to regularly do inventory and say, and I forgive myself again for that. Sometimes I might slip and something could happen. I go, man, I was a jerk in that relationship. Remember, in a relationship, if you look at like this, for every rip in a relationship, there needs to be a repair. So circling back, and it needs to be a repair with myself and say, Lord, you've forgiven me. I don't have to go back and all this deep surgery and reopen everything up, but I go, oh, that's a little tender. And I come back and I keep short inventories with other people, how I may have offended them, and with myself, ongoing process of forgiving.
Jim, thank you so much for this conversation. Here's the one thing I want to ask all of us to do. Betrayal is something we all have in common. I want you to be thinking, just take a few moments, literally right now, worship team is making their way out. I want you to think, what is the one thing you need to put into practice? What's the next step for you to take, not just to be a hearer of these words, the truth of Scripture, but to be a doer of these words? Because more than anything, we want you to find freedom from the things that hurt and the wounds of the past, the things that bind us, the things that prevent us from becoming everything God longs us to become. In just a few moments, your campus pastor is going to come back. They're going to lead us in a time of prayer as we continue in worship. But there's no hurt, there's no betrayal that's done to you or that you have done that Jesus Christ himself cannot forgive, heal, and use it as you minister to others in your future.